The ego is the system that runs your sense of self. It is made out of thought patterns, emotions, and behavioral loops, and the stories that try to hold it all together. Left unchecked, it creates endless existential searching, chronic disconnection, and the persistent sense that something is wrong. The goal of my videos is clarity, to see your identity and its contradictions for what they are, named precisely, to finally understand what it is that we're all running away from. In any other scenario, we're predisposed to viscerally recall the trauma. It felt like 1,000,000 raspings around my G-string. But in my memory it was the kiss of a butterfly wing. It serves a function so that I might do it again. I see the faith, I see the scars, see the pre-thought puncture. In any other scenario, we're predisposed. Okay. Okay. Big claim time. Big claim time. You see it? It's a big claim o'clock. God exists and God is real. And I'm saying this as an atheist. I'm saying this as somebody who was deeply into Christianity when I was a teen, became a hardcore atheist, and now I could tell in your face that God exists and reason to you to this from a rational place. And the question, of course, is always like a definition question. How do you define God? And before I give you the definition that I really want to say, I'm going to say God is what every philosopher is looking for, for real. Like every person who is strongly interested in philosophy and would say God doesn't exist, they are into philosophy because they want to convince themselves that God exists, but they can't. Now, actually, this is already a good claim to start off with. And the reason for this is that you are confronted with an existence that causes you a lot of struggle. And in this existence, you just have to be in the struggle for a long time. And you haven't like decided to be in this existence, and you haven't decided to struggle. Therefore, you are kind of feeling maybe trapped in this existence that you haven't signed up for. So it seems like whatever reality is kind of put you into like this weird place where you have to wonder if you are like a prisoner. And now philosophy tries to kind of like heal these existential wounds that we have with all of this pain and this feeling of being entrapped. And the only thing that liberates people, even though everybody has their own framing of this, is a God. And all looking for meaning and purpose and all of the stuff also relates to the connection with God. Now, what do I mean when I say God for me, right? And I know for everybody this can mean something different, but for me it is not a personal entity. It is much closer to like the Buddhist idea of Brahman, or you could also just switch the word God with reality, and I'm also fine with this, or with the universe, which is kind of like playing it small, but it's also fine. But all of them point to the same thing, which is just truth. God is truth. God is what is real, and God is what exists. This is really what it is all about. And people are in denial about existence, and they are in denial about how real reality is and how much it supersedes even their own death. And all of this stuff is just, too much to accept, or too much to accept with a purely reasonable mind, or purely logical mind. Although I think you can logic yourself to it too, which can also cause some problems, but we'll get to this later. Remind me, I might forget. So the idea is that what differentiates the concept of like God and God being reality is the fact that God is a conscious entity. So what I'm saying is that the universe is a conscious entity and existence is a conscious entity. And people are doing this thing where it's like, prove it to me. Show me that the universe is consciousness. Show me that the universe exists. It's right in front of your face, man. It is always the fact that the universe is conscious. Since you have been born, like since the first breath that you have taken, the universe has been conscious. Without the conscious quality of the universe, you wouldn't even be here in the first place. You would have no conception of reality whatsoever. Now, when people think about it this way, they are not satisfied because they feel a huge separation between their own perception of consciousness and the whole of reality. And the whole of reality feels like something they don't have control over, but the internal perception is something they have control over, and it's like them. And therefore, there's like the separation where they want the external consciousness to care about them personally, or to be like an entity that they can divert responsibility towards. Like finding the personhood in God, finding the self in God. When the only way you can actually get to this is finding the zero center of yourself. Reality is real and exists because you are real and you exist. It is almost incredible, but if you wouldn't exist, then nothing would. Like, actually, if there was no you here to perceive things, then there would be no perception at all. But since you are here and you do perceive things, you can add these numbers together and recognize that it's actually my perception that is evidence of perception at a cosmic level. The fact that you have personal perception is evidence of cosmic perception because you exist within a cosmos. You exist within a universe with laws and gravity and physics and all of the stuff that made you up in the first place. So you cannot separate consciousness as like a force from everything else. And what we struggle with is also like time frames, because we live for like 80 years, 100 years, maybe if we are lucky in the next 150 years, 200 years, something gets invented that makes us live even longer, who knows. But for like the universe, this is like nothing. The history of humanity is not even a dent in comparison to the history of dinosaurs. And they got very lucky, actually. They lived way longer than humanity has lived so far. So we just miss the time frame of everything. But we believe we are like this big center, but the center doesn't really exist in this way. The center is infinitely wide and infinitely dense. And it is the singularity that we find each other in. And if we are going towards scientific framings of things, then you just look at the Big Bang and you see this ever-expanding nature of things that you can point back to a singularity that then just merged everything into itself before beginning of time and space. So all of the esoteric things that I'm saying here can also be connected to physical theories. And theories are not hypotheses, right? Like a scientific theory is like a big deal. Like you require a lot of evidence for like a scientific theory. So now I want to give people the freedom to define God for themselves. So if you are a Christian, that's completely like fine, right? Like if you are a Muslim, that's also completely fine. We probably clash, like as a Christian also, like we will clash probably against a lot of political opinions and ideas about things should be structured and stuff. But I don't think it's about that. I think if we can remove the ego equation, any religion at its core is about unison. And it's the ego corrupting all religions that create the idea of unison into an idea of personal power and dominance over others. And it's precisely this that has like hurt all humanity since the dawn of time, and also gives the word God a very bad rap. And there's no wonder why you wouldn't want to attribute much credit to it. But I hope you can see that I'm kind of secularizing the idea of God as the awareness in all things. And this awareness in all things is known by direct perception. That's also why all religious folks will always tell you that they just know that God exists, and you cannot really disprove them because it's an intuition. And this intuition runs deep. But then on top of this intuition, you get all of the like holy books and all of the stuff that I think is human fantasy, and just the way humans have used these truths in order to structure society and find a way to come at peace with the existential nature of all things, which the projection of like a personal godhood makes it a lot easier. And I also have been very careful about the word because it is so grandiose. But you can see this in my videos, you can see it in Alex O'Connor videos, you can see it in other spiritual channels. God is the most clickable word because everybody is actually looking for it. They either like have a hateful relationship with reality, and therefore the hatred towards God is a topic that resonates with them even though they don't believe in God, or you have a very like loving relationship to God, which then you also have a loving relationship with reality. This all goes together, and it's not a coincidence because the truth underlying all of it is just a fact, and it's the nature of existence as a whole. So the biggest arrogance that people have is the idea that this truth cannot be known, and that's what atheists usually fall into. And it's this sort of hyper skeptical idea that truth can never be known, truth is always uncertain, and the only thing that I know is that I know nothing. And the core of my philosophy is non-duality, which means that all dualities are like they don't really exist. So I can always show you both sides of the coin and then show that the contradiction is real, like the paradox exists, and that's why it's all one. The duality between God existing and God not existing is kind of like the core duality of everyone. Like people cling to the notion of God, or people reject the notion of God. And if you're really at peace, neither of them kind of matter the same because you are finding yourself within it as the solid center that never waves or moves. And then when you die, who knows what will happen? But the arrogance is to not do this, but instead reject all other framings and not live in either paradox or like in either perspective first. Like it's one thing to see two contradictory statements and say both of them are true at once and neither of them are true. And then there's another thing to completely ignore like any true statement. Like none of it is true and I don't even want to know anything about it and all claims are just fantasy. If you do this, you are in denial of truth. You pretend that there's no solid ground to stand on ever. And this is precisely what the ego does. You convince yourself that the truth is relative, and therefore you lie to yourself. And it's very, very sneaky. You lie to yourself, and you don't recognize it because you have convinced yourself that it isn't really a lie, it's just uncertainty. And lies mask as uncertainty. You have uncertainty about what it is you really want, what it is you really are, what it is that you have done, the relationship that you have to a certain person, the relationship that you have to yourself, something that you want for somebody else. Like there's so much that we kind of just half admit to ourselves. And as long as you half admit something to yourself, you'll split. And the split is then psychological, and it is so deep that you don't notice it. And then somebody pokes you and hits your insecurity, and then it all sprawls out like a volcano. You cannot control it because it hit the wound. Insecure people are arrogant because they mask this wound. They overcompensate by pretending to be overly confident in order to not see how insecure they really are. Confidence is like a product of personal security, and insecurity masks as arrogance. And then you see an arrogant person, and somebody who also doesn't have confidence believes that the arrogant person is confident when it's actually coming from a position of lack. And the lack that most people have that are into like philosophy and existential stuff is the lack of belief in themselves, which is also the lack of belief in reality. Oftentimes, if you take the philosophical approach or like the very intellectualized approach, or then also as an extension, the lack of belief of reality or truth, which then you can at the highest level also call the lack of belief in God. It is all about the denial of the self. It is the denial of the fact that things are actually happening and there's a life that you're going to live and it's going to happen from beginning to end. And in the meantime, there will be a lot of stuff that's going to happen to you personally, and you will have to be there and experience it. And there will be nothing that you can do about it. Nothing. You have to go through it and you have to experience it. And it's this entire trajectory that is the truth. And it's this entire trajectory that has been given to you and that you are now flowing with or fighting. When you find somebody who is truly at peace with themselves and relatively successful, it is very common for them to believe in God. Even if you might think they're like a bad person or they behave in immoral ways, they usually have some sort of connection with God. And the feeling is that God has guided them throughout their life, which is another way to describe determinism if you want to put a philosophical frame on it. But it is the feeling of being guided by destiny, guided by fate, because you've been blessed by just the dice of the universe. And then this sense get then morphed into, oh, okay, so this is God. And usually you have a deeper connection with God if you're selfless, if you are not attached to the personal outcome, but you are enacting the effect or the outcome that you want to have on the external world. A lot of people think that somebody who is very successful is very self-obsessed. And this can be the case, right? If ego and lack is the main fuel, then you can make it this way. But there are also a lot of people who are very successful and wealthy, but it's from selflessness. And it's the selflessness that then shares and shares and shares. And this doesn't mean that they're like the perfect person or like Jesus Christ in person. Usually people have edges and stuff you can criticize about them, even if they're like very charitable. Mr. Beast is actually a good example of somebody who is extremely charitable and truly likes making the world a better place. And I truly believe that he does. And then this level of selflessness gets infected by all the insecure projection that everybody has around a person who is this generous. And it's, of course, not just selflessness, right? You also have something that is self-serving. I mean, the fact that somebody wants to share in the first place, you might argue is also a self-serving mechanism. But then if the universe is truly one system, then of course, God is the biggest narcissist ever, right? Everything is done for himself while having no self and then sharing and splitting it onto others. Paradoxes wherever you look. So yeah, this is my framing of God. I'll probably talk about this way more in the future. Subscribe if you haven't, and see ya.